Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has cancelled a deal with the UN refugee agency UNHCR to repatriate half of the asylum seekers in Israel. Netanyahu first announced plans to implement the agreement before suspending, then finally cancelling it.
In less than 24 hours, the hopes of 30,000 asylum seekers have been dashed. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu cancelled a UN deal which would have seen the repatriation of around 16,000 refugees. According to the deal, for every refugee repatriated in a Western country, Israel would grant one migrant temporary residence.
And yesterday we were all in tears of joy when we heard Prime Minister Netanyahu, and this morning we are just in tears. We can't believe that really he could go back on his word.
Prior to this, asylum seekers were given the option of jail or repatriation to either Rwanda or Uganda. The most recent deal was seen as a more humane option for the thousands of migrants in Israel.
It's a win-win situation. It will benefit Israel because it will be able to meet its international obligations. It will also have an international component because other countries will share in the responsibility. We hope that soon the Prime Minister will be able to obtain the necessary support so that the implementation can go ahead.
But Netanyahu was unable to garner support from Israel's right wing. Netanyahu first announced the suspension of the deal on his Facebook. The following day, he cancelled the arrangement. Protesters gathered following his announcement.
I don't know what it needed the government of Israel to go in zigzag way.
With the Rwandese and Ugandan governments only taking voluntary repatriations, thousands of migrants remain uncertain of their future. Astatal, CGTN.
Well, let's get you more insight on this developing story. Joining us now is Nick Harper, live for us at the UN headquarters in New York. Nick, UNHCR was behind the initial deal for the resettlement of the refugees, both in Israel and some Western nations. What's the UN's reaction to Prime Minister Netanyahu's apparent flip-flop on that deal?
Well, yes, the UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, has put out a statement. They've also spoken about Benjamin Netanyahu's decision on this, and they say that they've noted that decision with regret. They say that they are continuing to engage with Prime Minister Netanyahu. They're remaining in close contact, and they're hoping that he will reconsider what he has decided. You have to bear in mind that UNHCR has spent months working on this deal, trying to find a humane situation, a resolution to this issue inside Israel. And as we heard just a moment ago, they felt it was a win-win agreement. That has been their position on this throughout, that it would not only be good news for Israel, but also for those asylum seekers who were stuck inside Israel, overall providing that solution for both sides. But they also feel that it would have saved lives. These migrants wouldn't have been sent back to their home countries. They wouldn't have been sent on to other countries that they didn't want to have to return to. And they hoped, therefore, that it would really be the safest solution for everyone involved. So there's certainly disappointment from the United Nations and the Refugee Agency, UNHCR, at this reversal of decision from the Prime Minister of Israel.
Nick, so what options are left for the United Nations, considering that its solution appears to go against the dominant public opinion in Israel?
Well, exactly. For the migrants, the asylum seekers inside Israel, they're effectively in immigration limbo now. There is no new deal on the table. This one has been cancelled, and before this, Israel was saying that it would be forced deportations or prison for these migrants. Those were the only two options that they were being given. However, the plans for those forced deportations, what was a plan at one point before we had this new UNHCR plan, even that doesn't look as if it could be re-implemented. Some of the countries that they would have been sent to, Uganda, Rwanda, were against that plan. Rwanda, for example, saying that they would only accept in migrants who had left Israel voluntarily. They wouldn't take in any of the migrants who were forcibly deported from Israel. Also bear in mind that this creates something of a moral dilemma for Israel. For the last 70 years since its creation, it really has been that haven for the Jewish people, a place where they can find a safe haven and a place free from persecution. And yet here we have a situation where they have taken in people from Sudan and Eritrea, people who faced persecution, who the UN says if they were to be returned to their home countries would face more persecution and potentially retribution as well. So no deal at the moment on the table for these migrants, these asylum seekers. It's really unclear exactly what path forward Israel, the UN, all these migrants will now be able to take.
Okay, Nick Harper at the UN headquarters in New York, thank you. We now have with us Stephanie Freed joining us live from Tel Aviv. Stephanie, what is Israel's official position now on the fate of the immigrants following the Prime Minister's apparent flip-flop?
Well, the flip-flop leaves kind of, Karen, no official place whatsoever. And it actually has created more questions than it has answered because the Prime Minister officially is saying, deal is off. We had a deal with the UN, but I changed my mind. What he is putting in place, nobody knows. And especially the reason that begs more questions is because when this original plan to deport possibly tens of thousands of Eritreans and Sudanese out of Israel, when that came into place, the understanding was that it was coming into place because a deal had been struck between Israel and Rwanda and Israel and Uganda for the deportation or resettlement. But then certainly there were a good number of protests, both in Israel throughout the world, a lot of outcry, people, including organizations, calling on the Prime Minister, calling on the State of Israel to rethink that track because it hadn't proved successful and harmful, in fact, to those who are seeking asylum. Now, if the deals having fallen through, there is no place to send people if that is Israel's aim. And so the question is, do they stay here? Well, I spoke with an attorney who has been very, very active within the framework of trying to keep these deportations from happening. And he said exactly what I said at the beginning, many, many questions. This doesn't answer any questions. And we don't know what policy the Prime Minister is going to take going forward. So right now we just know that he canceled. What will happen in the coming future, near future, far future, we just don't know right now.
So, Stephanie, we don't know what's going to happen in the coming days. The Prime Minister cites lack of support at home for this change of mind.
In terms of support, the criticism, what happened is there was a tremendous amount of criticism against the Prime Minister the minute he announced that deal. So the criticism from people who are his rivals, the right-wing voice, the racist voice, some would say, in Israel. Will that voice change? No. That voice that wants Africans to, quote unquote, be kicked out, be sent away, not to be in Israel, that voice is not going to change. It's certainly not going to change the voices of the people who are very much in favor of stopping any type of deportation and of humane treatment, of absorbing those who are seeking asylum, and on and on and on. So the stances of the people in place certainly won't change. Will the Prime Minister change his stance? Hard to say. Many say he's an ace politician, and it's all about his political position. And that is going to, this is the popular wisdom here, or the popular belief here, that's going to affect whatever decision he makes going forward.
Okay, well, we'll wait and see. That was Stephanie Freed there, live for us in Tel Aviv on the situation with the refugees there.